So my name is David. One sec. My name is David Padilla. You can find me on the internet at Zabit, on Twitter, GitHub, and some of our social networks. Michelada, which is a software development consulting company in Mexico. We take our name from a famous Mexican drink, which is my personal favorite. If you never had a michelada, it's basically just ice, clam juice, some magical Mexican soy sauce, powdered chili, sea salt, lime juice, and beer. So you get delicious michelada. So you should try it if you've never had one. But let's move to this here. So I'm here to talk to you, or here to give you tips and tricks for new developers. I give the talk, I usually give a little bit of backstory, like where does this come from? So a long time ago, you know, I've been developing Ruby and Rails applications for quite a long time now. The first one that I did was back in 2009. I started programming with Ruby on Rails, and I was moving from the Microsoft world into something more exciting. And there was an event that was held in Las Vegas, which was one of the first few Rails Confs. And I attended. I was lucky enough to attend it. And at the time, we were building a big e-commerce. Well, it was gonna become big e-commerce platform. We didn't know it at the time. But there was not a lot of information on the internet about using web applications with Ruby. So it was very valuable to me, like solving the riddle of search, using spins with Rails. This talk, point in time, made me figure out that there was something better to filter, like products and records, instead of using SQL queries, or a like statement on SQL with. So it helped me a lot to figure out that there was this whole world on searches. We didn't use Sphinx. We actually ended up using Solar, but in the end, the inspiration was there from watching that talk. I heard about WebRat, which is something you probably don't remember about because it's not used anymore. But it was, it was like a DSL your applications way before Capybara existed. When I got to ResConf, I didn't know about acceptance testing, and then I heard about WebRat, so I tried to implement it, and I learned about that. And the most important one, I think, it was learning about JIT, even though it's not like but it was still pretty young, the GitHub community and all that. And it was actually given, that this talk was given by one of the first few employees at GitHub, Scott Chacon. And it was pretty fun. It was, he started with a very, very quick talk. He called it Git in 60 seconds. He just read a bunch of text really quick, explain what Git is, in record time. And then he proceeded to give an actual talk. But the important thing is that at that point, I was using SVN. And then before that, I was using Visual Source Safe. So learning about Git was quite the experience. And when I came back, I came back to the team and say, yeah, we need to use this to handle our code. Like I said, it was pretty new. There were not too many applications out there using Rails. So I didn't know exactly what to do. Like, once you have the Rails application, what do you do with it? And back then, we used a web server that was called Mongrel. And that's, at that RailsConf, I learned that you needed to have several instances of Mongrel running on different HTTP ports. And then you have something like Nginx, which was pretty new, or Apache, doing some proxying on those different ports. And then you have a load balancer distributing all the requests among all those clusters, and then that's the way you scale, right? You just added a bunch of servers and everything just worked. And this was way before there was Heroku or Puma or things like that makes things so much easier. So I learned a lot at that RailsConf. So I decided that for last RailsConf at 2017 that we need more talks for beginners, and that we needed to learn how to have big applications, billions of requests per second, or that we can divide our applications in microservices, but we also need talks for people that are just beginning. So that's why this talk came to me, and that's why I'm here. So as a warning, this is for beginners, and you may know most of the things that I will mention here, but still you might learn a trick or two. It's all based on personal experience and things that I do when I start a project. So let's begin. And I'll begin talking about configuration files. So when you start a new application, you run your Rails new commands, and this is going to create all those folders that you need to run your application. It's going to run bundle install. It's going to install everything that you need. The first thing that you want to do is to copy your database YAML file and an example file.
David, sorry to interrupt.
Yes?
Should we be seeing your screen right now? Because we're not.
Sorry. Can you see it right now?
No. Oh, yes. Okay, there we go.
Right. So there's probably something wrong with the. One sec. Let me see. Yeah, I think there's some. Let's see. Does this work?
Yeah. Okay, that's
all right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So the first thing I want to talk about is configuration files. You run your Rails new command magic. It's gonna create all the necessary files to create an application. Run bundle install to install your dependencies and whatnot. So the first thing that I usually do when I create a new application is create a copy of the database file with example configurations. So older people have access to it. You have to keep it updated with whatever your team is using, Postgres, MySQL, or whatever it is. And this way, like common courtesy, when a new developer joins the team, they need to copy the file and just put it as their main database file, and they can start working right away. So they don't have to investigate what the editor needs to be or what the database name has to be or anything. So you can start. And speaking about other configuration files, you can actually do the same. You have a secrets file, samples on it, then maybe you can create a copy of it and keep it on your repo. Your teammates can access real quick and have those files in their local environment. So you don't have to stop and think about values or what are the proper keys or anything. This is very helpful. Another thing that you can do with configuration files is that you can create your own. You don't have to settle with what you have. So you can just create, for example, if you want to have all configuration that's related to payments, you simply create a config /payments YAML file and just add the keys you need or whatever settings that you need for each environment. And then you can just call it using this syntax, rails.application.config4, and the name of the YAML file, and it will be right there. You don't need to do any extra configuration. It will just try to find the YAML file corresponding to the scene that you're passing right there. So you have you know, a config file for your payments, a config file for whatever API you're connecting, and you can actually make it easier to keep you know, everything clean and to keep everything that your team uses just in order environments. And here's another tip. Whatever there's a string of your code or an integer in your code to a value, you probably want to use a constant, or you probably want to use a setting on a YAML file. Say that, for example, you have code like this, where you say, well, if you know, this model's registered that is less than 30 minutes ago, use something. You'd rather use constant to set up that that integer right there. Or if it's going to change a lot, you can use setting, and it will be, you know, it will be better for you. You will be very happy you did this when your boss comes and says, hey, you need to change that limit 10 minutes. And then since bosses can make their mind, they probably want to change it to 15 minutes a few days later. And you're going to be happy that you have a single place where those kind of settings change. Even if it's a constant, it's pretty easy to you know, locate them at the top of classes. And if it's setting, even better, because you just need to change YAML files and restart your server, and you're good to go. So if you see an integer to a setting or a constant, it's pretty useful. Speaking of the database, this is a weird one. Do not ignore on your repository your DB schema file. As weird as it sounds, I've been to teams that actually just remove this file or ignore it on JIT. When I ask them, like, what was the logic behind that, they just say, you know, it's because they were having a lot of conflicts between different branches. And, you know, I just facepalm, because that's what it's supposed to do, right? To make sure that we're all aware that there's changes in the database. So please don't do this. Your schema file is very, very important, because you should always be able to get a clean database using Rails DB setup or Rails DB reset, whatever you prefer. And that both these commands rely on the schema file. So you want to keep this, because otherwise you're gonna have to, you know, do something weird like change your database with one of your teammates, or having to send straight SQL files or something that you shouldn't. And you know, in order for all of this to work too, it's actually pretty nice to have a seed file. You get, so you have actually useful DB seed files that, you know, if you have a system that has users and has products and has, I don't know, brands, it's very useful to actually create seeds that have a working environment right started. So if you just want to get rid of your development database because something comes up, you can just do it safely, and you will just have, once you run your seed file. So it's pretty useful to just keep it updated and keep it with useful data that you can use for development. Another golden rule is please don't change your data in database migrations. This is a very, very, very common mistake, and it's common and hard to avoid. Please be careful when you change your data in your database migrations. An example, this is something that you will see code like this, right? Where we're trying to add a new column that's zip code, and we're adding another column that's name, and we're gonna we're gonna find all the companies that exist right now, and we're gonna get from the company code its name and its zip code, and we're gonna update all those companies and set it on their corresponding column. And then in the end, we're gonna just remove the code column. We're sort of splitting the code into a zip code and a name. And the problem with this kind of code is that it's not future-proof. And even though I've mentioned that maybe migrations should not be, you still want to keep some sanity as much as you can. And the problem with it happens if you know, in the future you change your company model, it's now an organization, then this migration will stop working because, you know, there's no company model anymore. So you can't recreate your database for migrations. So I know it's not supposed to be that way, but you know, you want to keep them as clean as possible. Another problem with this is that you can risk longer deploy times, because it's very common that you think, you know, and this is going to solve your problem. What happens if you forget that there's, you know, 3 to 5 million records in your company table in production? So development is fine, staging is fine, and this is going to take maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe it's going to take 5 minutes. So you're risking downtime because you're not, you know, you can't start your server until the migration is done. So, you know, something can go wrong and then your whole website goes down in flames. So you don't want that. And, you know, there's another problem here. What happens if you forgot that there might be companies with code set as nil? Then this is gonna, you know, give you an exception maybe 5 minutes later, and then you have to log into the server, run the migration again, all interruption, and you know, all those kinds of adventures that you want to avoid. So just try not to change your data on your migrations. Try to avoid as much as possible. A good alternative is to use SQL instead of you know, Ruby and Active Record. So you can do the same thing with something like this, yeah, and executing just a regular update. You know, just set the name something, which is using SQL splits, and you know, this is going to run, even if it's 5 million records, it's going to run way faster than just iterating over all the company records using Active Record. So try to think how you can do the change on your data. You're going to do it. I don't think you have to do it with SQL, and that's going to be faster, very likely. And another thing that you can do is just use a gem. There's plenty of them, like this one that's called Rails Data Migrations, which what it does is separate migrations in two. You have your regular migrations that are for you know, for the schema, and then you get data migrations that are for changes like this. So instead of having, you know, let's say that you have a small migration where you update all authors and you know, just set them all active as true, you split this in two migrations. You will have sets the authors as active, and then it will create a different file in a different folder, and then you just copy that specific code to that data migration and remove from your actual migrations, schema migration. So the way this works now is that you run your DB migration first, your columns, you do whatever you need to do, more than one, and then maybe after your server has been reset and everything is fine, you can run your, and that's something separate. So this is way safer, right? Because you still set your database in the state that you want it to be in, go and change all the data that you need to change. And it's completely separate. It only runs once. Migrations stay, you know, just specific for schema changes, and that's good. So let's talk a bit about background jobs, and it's pretty usual these days to use background jobs to send all those tasks that you want to run along with the web server. And you can use, Sidekick or Rescue or Delay Job. There's plenty of processors written in Ruby that you can use on your Rails applications. But there's a pretty common that you can do here, which is passing objects to background jobs as an argument. So this is pretty bad. So what I mean is, don't do this. Don't do. Let's say that you have your class that's a big bad job and it has a method that's perform, and you need on this background job something needs to be done with an order object. So you're better off writing your code like this. Just pass the ID to the queue, and those objects again in your code. It doesn't matter that you're doing the query again, because it's actually happening on the background. So there's no like performance implications or anything. And I know some queue like this is important when you use delay job. I don't know if you know how delay job works, but it actually uses your database as its queue. So what it does is it serializes objects as YAML, and it deserializes when it needs them. So what I've seen happen, and this is not like something I read, I've seen it happen, is that when that serialization happens, if objects are too big, there's there's some corruption, and sometimes they just the objects are truncated, just blow up with for no reason. So you're better off just passing the integers of the IDs. And some queue processors like Sidekick actually do this automatically, but still don't leave it to chance. Just pass the IDs, find the objects in your code, and just make sure that everything will be fine and that everything is in the right state you intend to do it. Speaking of background, it's also important to always deliver your email later. Never do it along with your web application. It's pretty easy, when you use Rails 4 and up. It's really easy to do this. The same rule applies. Don't pass objects, pass IDs to the mailer, because they're also objects that are being serialized at some point. And then if you use Sidekick or delay job, you can just do for older version of Rails, that delay, and then send whatever you want to send, and it automatically sends them to the queue, and send them later when the queue server is available. Or for recent versions of Rails, you just have active job and just do dot deliver later, and that will take care of everything. And the important, this is important because I've seen it. SMTP is not perfect. If you're seeing your email, it's usually via third party, and even Google fails. So you don't want your customer, for example, not being able to buy your product or your subscription or whatever it is, because you can't send them an email. So just if you just delay that email for later because it's not important, just do that, and let the money roll in. Don't stop for that. This one, this is another common mistake that I've seen on many Rails applications. You have to be RESTful all the time. There's no excuse to not being RESTful. And REST is kind of simple to explain, but actually hard to implement once you're with a Rails application. So RESTful, I explain it this way to people. RESTful, it's all about having tools on your controllers and nothing more. You can only have an index, you can only show an object, you can only have a new one, create one, update, or delete. No other actions belong to a controller. There's always a solution to your problem, and that is not creating a custom action on your controller. So, as an example, for example, you have a products controller and you have a link that deactivate your product, and you're probably tempted to do something like this. Just do an action, deactivate, and have a link to that goes to this action. This is easy to do, but it's wrong. You need to think what's changing with with this specific action that you're doing, because that's REST means, represent state transfer. So that means you have a resource that's somehow changing. So in this case, your product itself, but maybe state is changing. So it's better off if you have a product states controller and you have an update action, and it's the way you actually do it, right? Like you have your status, and maybe as a parameter, you send what status it's changing to. This is something way better than just having a custom action on your controller. One, you have a cards controller, and then the customer can add a coupon. You're tempted to just have an action that does a coupon and does whatever it needs to, whatever discount needs to create. Well, maybe you just want to have a discounts controller, and you're creating a discount when you add a coupon. So maybe that's what you need, right? It's always about creating stuff or updating stuff. That's the general rule of REST. This is a common one. You have a search, and so you just create a search action. Nope. Contact searches controller, and it may be show. Some people use index because it doesn't actually have a state. Use resource instead of resources. So I think show is more appropriate. Just show your search, or maybe context search results controller. That will be more idiomatic. I don't know, but just don't use a custom action on the controller, because that's much worse. So remember, this is like the golden rule of REST. Can only be named index, show, new, create, edit, update, or delete. No more. I'm going to talk about a few gems that I think you must have in all your projects. This is what I do. Like the first few gems that I install when I start a new project. The first one is Robocop. You probably heard of it. If you haven't, Robocop does an automated style check of your code, give you a lot of hints about some things that can be improved. And I've heard excuses about, I don't add Robocop to my project because it's it's already ongoing and I don't factor everything I did. Well, here's the trick. You can actually run Robocop with this option, autogen config. We'll create a file that's called Robocop _to-do. On your main Robocop file, you can just inherit from that file. And what it's going to do, it's run Robocop, take all the offenses, that's how it calls it, and then add exceptions to whatever is there right now. The next time you call Robocop, you have a to-do file. When you add that line, it's going to be running green for Robocop because you have that exception file. But that you start adding, it's still going to throw errors for that specific code that you're adding since it's new. So the purpose of this to-do file is that you come back and then maybe start little by little, taking the rules of your breaking and fixing them. But instead of fixing all of them and implementing Robocop, you can do it by rule. So this is very useful if you want to actually implement Robocop on a existing project. And then you can also use the to-do file to set your actual metrics. Maybe your metrics are not as strict as, so let's say that, for example, you can take this option. This is one of the checks that Robocop does, the line length, how many characters are on every line of your code. The default, I think it's 80. 80 is just, for some people, it's not too many characters. So maybe you want to increase that to 130. Maybe you want to increase it to 150. Depends on your monitor. So you can actually add that as a permanent rule for all all the files. Out some some of the, for example, that you don't want to write documentation for your specs or your specs files or some of the files. You just want to add exclusions. So you want to take that from your to-do and maybe just remove it all together on your main file, documentation on your class file. That's taste. So I don't do it. I remove it personally, but maybe you want to do it for some files. This is a good one. Maybe you. I think the default for method length it's 5 or 7. Not sure. It's hard to have all your Ruby code written in functions that are no longer than 7 lines. Increase it to 10, which is still hard, but I think it keeps some, and it's possible. And you should try it if you haven't done it yet. Try to write your Ruby code in no more than 10 lines of code. But in the end, this is for good, because I always tell new Ruby developers is that you're supposed to be testing your code in units. That's why it's called unit tests, and separating your code in as possible. It's going to make it so much easier, and so much easier to debug, and so much easier to understand. So this is a good one. You should definitely try to restrain with this one. And if you're using Robocop, in our case we have our CI server actually runs Robocop. Fails if there's a violation of the style. So to add a pre-push hook to your Git, so it runs Robocop before you do Git push, because otherwise your repo is gonna just start clogging with commits that are just fixing Robocop style things, and then Robocop, Robocop, and oh, I forgot about Robocop, and it's not nice. So you'd rather have your team run Robocop before they push code into your repo. Find something is wrong, they can just amend their commit. Midline stays cleaner. I guess that's the word I'd use. One of my favorites, it's Annotate. I don't see it in the wild often. Like I've never seen it outside of my own projects. I don't know why people don't use it often. I find it very, very useful. So what Annotate does is when you run it, let's say you have a model that it's the user model that has a name, a username, a password, and an active column. Runs your migrations, and then run Annotate. It's gonna add the class, the schema information of your table. So this is very useful. because when I'm writing my code, I don't have to, do something extra to remember the name of the columns in my model, or or maybe even other models. I know that I can just go to the class and see at its top, and I will be able to see its type and its name and whatever restrictions there are for every column, and just in typing. So this is very useful. It's also useful because I am very old and I use VI as my editor, and it has contextual completion. So it only auto-completes for whatever it's on first. So I need this if I want to auto-complete a specific model's columns. And then there's another use very similar, that if you run it with the routes option, it will also annotate your routes file. Get all these, the routes right there at the top of config /routes.rb, instead of having to run whenever you forget about something. You can just go to these comments and just immediately you can take a look at how your routes are being generated. And this is very small compared to a real Rails application. As it grows, you can just get hundreds of routes. So it's very useful to have a place where you can just go real quick and figure out if you're creating a link to a route, or if you are not getting to a route, figure out why it's not there and all that. So this is very useful. So I really, really, really recommend that you use Annotate for all your projects. Another one is Bullet. Bullet, what it does is it detects the N+1 problem developing your application, instead of waiting to have performance problems in production. So let's say if you don't know what the N+1 problem is, which is very common in Rails applications. Let's say that you have a book model that belongs to an author and has many comments. You have your comment class, which just has, and your comment class, which in turn belongs to user and belongs to a book, and have your index page that shows it shows your books with the title, a description, and maybe the author and how many comments he has. Probably this is how your controller looks. Just book.all, just bring them all and display very, very nicely. This is showing up. This is displaying properly. But you don't realize that what's happening in the background is that you're bringing. You have to bring a specific author for that book and maybe how many comments you have. And then this is happening for all the books in your database. So if you have, maybe if you're showing them, then maybe you're 30 queries for every time you go to that page, which is, it's a very simple query, but still, you configure Bullet to install the gem, and then you can add some options to it. Like, for example, in this case, I'm enabling it. I want it to show on my console, on my Rails logs, and to add a footer to my page. What's going to happen if you run this code again, at the bottom of the page, Bullet's going to tell me, hey, your book, but maybe you should include your author, and maybe you should include your comments, because that's going to make everything so much better. That I enabled, I'm going to be able to see that same information on my log and the output of my server. So it's going to tell you that there's probably a better way to load all that information, and you can actually just copy and paste it. Just say includes your author and include my comments with a specific user, and then page you're going to see that you don't have 30 queries anymore. You only have like one per model, and that's going to make the database server so much happier. I know on your local server does not, there's no impact whatsoever. But when your application starts growing and there's a lot of rows in your database and a lot of requests being handled by your web server, all these details matter, trust me, and it's going to matter in terms of seconds that it takes to handle every request, because it's all like a chain reaction, right? If the database is slow, then the web server is going to take more time, and then the JavaScript is going to take more time, and then the client is just going to be very, very annoyed that your website is slow. So it's simple that just having there, you can actually configure it to throw an exception if it finds the n+1 problem. So you can add it to what we do is we add it to our tests, and we enable it to throw the exception if it finds a problem. So the build actually fails if there's a problem with Bullet, and that's great because we can detect it on a continuous duration server. I would really recommend to use this. The other one, similar gem, is Oink. It's sort of the same, but it helps you detect memory leaks before it's too late. From experience, I can tell you that if your Ruby application is leaking memory, probably never going to fix it and just have to live with it, because it's so hard to find memory leaks on a Rails application, and they can happen, all sort of weird stuff that you just don't want that to happen when you're already in production. And once it happens, you're better off just, when your on RAM, and then spending time hunting that memory. But if you want to actually, just give it a try, then use Oink, which it's up as middleware, where you want it to log its findings, and then you get something like this on your logger. At the bottom of your logs, it's going to show what kind of objects are being created, how much memory your page is taking. And memory leaks usually happen if you see that you're creating 500 comments when you're only showing. If you see something on your logs, then defining the memory leak. It's probably because you're creating way too many active record objects when you don't need it. So it's going to get you closer to the memory leak, and those are awful. So you should really, really use it. Just use Oink, test your application, make sure that you're not creating too many active record objects. Play safe if you can. And I guess that's all. That's what I have for you. Other than that, I guess I'll take your questions.
All right, any questions?
Let me try to share my screen. Oh, there it is.
Nobody? Okay.
David, can you share some of those your preferred gems that you have?
Yeah, sure. I can send you the slides.
Okay.
I'll share them with Louis, and then maybe he can share it with the group.
Okay, yeah. Send them to me, and I'll post them on the Meetup site, or send out a tweet. Cool.
Do you have any opinion on using Haml with Rails?
Yes, I use it. That's what I prefer, actually.
Okay.
I know there's people that very. I found all sorts of people that say that it's slower than ERB, but there's no difference, to be honest. it's the same thing. It's in the nanosecond space. Why should it matter? In my opinion, I think it makes more fun and more clean and more understandable. Something I want to have, or you want to have, especially when your team is large. There's people learning. You also want to have a great tool for them to learn. I'm all for it. I root for Amon.
Cool.
Cool. Any other questions?
What version of Rails are you using?
Lately, I've been using 5.1. 4.2 application I migrated it into 5.1. So yeah, I could say that that's what I'm using as soon as possible, especially when there's cool features. In 5.1 had a lot of things that I liked a lot, like for example, the secrets thing, where you can now encrypt your YAML files on your local environment, then just push that into your repo and don't worry about your Amazon keys stolen. I love that feature. But still, there's a lot of things that I'm not liking. The whole versus asset pipeline is confusing for me right now.
Okay.
Especially because I'm not a front-end developer.
Yeah.
They change a lot of things around auto-generating IDs for elements, especially things I don't like because they now want you to HTML inputs, for example, manually. And I'm used to Rails for me, and I'm still like not coping with that. So,
have you used Action Table?
Action Table, I've only used it a few. I think we used it. We tried to use it in a project, but it was a project where we needed to have. It was sort of an auction website. So there needed to be a lot of people connected, and a timer happening, and then people set bits. So all of this need time. The thing that I found is that are very different. Action Table works, but the problem is with the client. So we ended up with Pusher.js because it has a client library that has all these fallbacks. And it just worked, and that's it's late that I had to do that, but the truth is that we use Action Table, it worked in our computers, but then the client logged in and said, yeah, it's not working for me, and we had to do a lot of research and was with their firewall, and we told them that, but they say it just doesn't work for me, so it doesn't work for anybody. It's just long to go with Pusher in the end.
Okay, it's interesting. I'll ask you a question people ask me all the time. What are good resources to learn Rails? Like, what do you recommend if people want to learn Rails?
I will go with the Rails guide, the rated. To be honest, just going to guides.rubyonrails.org, those, it's a great source of all sorts of information. And most of the things that I talk, it's right there. It's just that for some reason people can go there as their source of. And I usually, when I'm sort of teaching new people, I usually send them right to the guys. Like it's basically like, don't talk to me until you have read, from beginning to end, because it's all there. It's all there. It's very good documented. Maybe it's not in order. They don't show you like the website. The first thing that you need to do is review, but you learn a lot of things that you didn't know about active record and about internationalization and about routes, about routing. You're going to learn a lot of advanced tricks that you didn't know that actually existed. So in my personal opinion, that's the best learning material out there.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I've used them quite a bit and learned a lot from them too. So I think that's a good resource. Any other questions?
Not for me.
All right. I think we're good. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks to you.
Maybe we'll see each other at a conference.
No.
Say hi. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Actually, I have a